The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the hosts' past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Brian for Breaking Down Security. This week is part 2 of our discussion with Doug and Eric from the K-12-6 organization. They're a threat information sharing community for education institutions here in the United States, mostly dealing with elementary and secondary education. So for those of you who are outside the U.S., that would be grades from kindergarten or preschool up to high school, or what we consider secondary school, up to 12th grade. If you there's, as we talked about last week, there's a lot of problems there. There's, technological issues, there's contractual issues, there's, it's an area rife with legacy technology, and, there's not a lot of security or IT people who may be available at various organizations to do things. As we have heard, it's sometimes you get, it's like when you go to your parents' house, you're the person who knows computers, so you get to do, fix whatever it is that has infected
there's no question. And I mean, I think
parents'
this is the
computer
interesting
or
thing,
your,
right?
your
So,
siblings' computers or what have you. So
our parent organization is a nonprofit.
Their job is to help with threat information sharing.
Eric and I were doing this work and spending, frankly, a lot of time
ransomware, which is
outside of our day
to
jobs,
education institutions,
working on this issue, not getting paid for it,
making sure that there's guidelines that they can help people with. There's virtual CISO services. So we're
and met people like
going to
April
spend
and
some more time
Nathan,
with Doug and Eric this week talking about their role and how they help organizations do those things.
K-12-6
ended last week talking about some of the affiliates and vendors. I think we talked about the ambassadorship program this week. So if you're
$1 billion
interested
from a Cisco or a
not
Microsoft
just here in
or
the
$1 million
US, but elsewhere, if there may be similar organizations,
the Global Resilience
that do,
Federation,
EDU advisory services, you might
invested
want
some
to reach
money
out to them and see how you can help your local schools or educational institutions with things like IT or security or best practices
to where we are.
Help shore up their
as
their
Eric and I talk, there's so much
hope
more
you enjoyed this
that could be done that we would
started.
love to do. More schools that we could and need to serve and need to be served. And frankly, we are charging for our membership, right? But schools need these services, and their budgets are strapped,
right?
Quite considerably already, right? It would be, fabulous. It would be, to get that kind of support, and we're looking for it, but it's not, we're not going to wait to do the work. In the meantime, we're just going to try to, keep on doing the right thing, and hopefully the momentum will continue to grow, and people will start to recognize the need, and sort of we'll build it and they will come, is the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, and actually, one thing, going back to your initial question about how do we get the word out and stuff, and actually I'll let Doug talk about this, but one of the things that's, which you've already kind of quoted from, is our yearly report, but that's Doug's working on that currently to get that out. So that's one of a big piece of, recognition for us.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Mr. Betcher, you've got some kids. Miss Berlin's got a few kids. I've got one. What you're thinking, when you do you get emails from school, or, what keeps you up at night when you're thinking about, your kids, Social Security numbers getting dropped by, your school system or something, They don't have any credit right now, so they're nice and pristine, and nobody's going to know, and they're going to fly under the radar. And they go to buy a car, and they were involved in some breach 5 years ago, and they can't even get a 1987 Yugo. So does that keep you up at night?
I'm just really glad they all switched to Chromebooks.
Oh, right. Right.
But there's a lot of truth to that, though.
Yeah. Granted, I think all of the, every grade has their own password. So they all share a password. across the full grade.
There's still, there is so much stuff like that in schools that you just, when I walked into schools the first time, like I said, after coming out of the private sector, I just thought, how can you even think about doing this? But to them, it's just like, oh, this is just how we operate.
Yeah. Then they told the kids that their logins wouldn't work except if they were at school. And it's just G Suite. Like that's not a thing.
Yeah, they saw through that in about 5 minutes, I think. So yeah.
Well, when you tell a kid something like that, what's the first thing they're going to go do? They're going to go test it. They're going to go test it.
Of course.
And then email everybody, hey, here you go.
Like
this is how things work. I mean, but it's funny because this is what I tell people all the time about the bad guys. This is how bad guys operate. They find something and they share it with everybody.
Yeah.
And so we're losing because we don't want to share anything with anybody except for the stuff we're not supposed to share with everybody. Right. So
Yep. So what's some of the biggest changes you've seen since you've stood this up? I mean, obviously everybody's trying to go to the cloud. G Suite, Ms. Berlin mentioned G Suite. I think my daughter's school was using or is still using G Suite at one time, but there's probably some orgs out there using like Office 365. If the school doesn't have an IT organization that understands that, you've got somebody who's just like, oh, I've got a credit card and I see an Office 365 login, I'm going to go ahead and buy that. Do you have specific guidance, or let's say somebody does come to you and say, hey, we need AV. Who do you recommend? Do you have a checklist, or, I know you said you're vendor agnostic, but I mean, do you have resources where people can, sit down with you? And I know you mentioned the virtual CISO items. Is that part of the virtual CISO thing? It's like, hey, here's some AV that doesn't suck, or, hey, here's some of the new ACLs that you should be blocking on your firewalls. I mean,
so I don't think. Yeah, so I don't think, I'm not going to, in one of those sessions, recommend, say, hey, here's, but if they come to me with a specific product and say, hey, we're looking at this product, what are your thoughts? I will give them that. But this is one of the points that's important for members and everybody to understand about K-12-6 and other member sharing communities is this is where the strength of the community comes in. Because this is where you go ask other members, hey, and actually we've had a number of RFIs just on this, where a member will say, look, we're looking at a new firewall, or we're looking at whatever it may be. And they'll send an RFI out, say, to other members, say, hey, how are they to work with? What were your costs? All the questions that you want to ask. That is exactly one of the things that membership, the members should be doing in that communication with each other. Now, at the same time, there are products that if there's certain products, honestly, like if a school at a certain level came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about spending money on this product and doing this, I would flat out tell them no, because they're not at the maturity level they need to. Like if one of these schools that, came and said, hey, we're going to implement, and like Doug mentioned earlier, there's all these companies out there selling products that'll basically, we'll do everything. Your environment will be secure. You never have to worry about anything. There's going to be times when we're going to say, look, you may not want to do that, because, and this is how I try to direct anybody that I talk to, schools or anyone, is so many organizations, and this is schools and private, they take a product and try to jam it into their organization. That's the wrong way to do things. Go out and determine what your needs are, and then pick products based on those needs. And so that's what I try to get. When I have discussions with schools that are saying, hey, what do you think about this product? We want to implement this. I say, slow down. What are you trying to accomplish?
Right. I was trying to, one of the things I wanted to look up, and I found a number that is scary is all hell. According to edweek.org, as of 2017, 2018, there are 130,930 public private K-12 schools in the U.S., just in the U.S. You said that before we started that 85 to 89% of those assuming 130,000. I don't know if you have better numbers. This is what I've seen from MedWeek, but 85 to 89% of those are underneath 25,000 students. So roughly
2,500 students.
25. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
20. Yeah, that makes a huge difference. 25,000 versus order of magnitude. I think my high school had about 150 students in it. So we had about 3,000 people in the whole town. So how many?
Your numbers are correct. I mean, so with public school districts, there's 30-something thousand school districts in the United States. And then, and add that to the private schools. And so that number's pretty, a good approximation.
Yeah. And it gets pretty wonky because you start charter schools are considered their own school districts. And it's, and some states, a school district is the county. So a state like Florida or Maryland, but then you go to a state like Oklahoma and you have multiple school districts in the same zip code, no regional education agencies, everybody's independent on their own, small districts. State of Illinois, Chicago Public Schools has like 70% or 80% of the kids in the state go to Chicago Public Schools. There's 1,200 other school districts in the state of Illinois serving the other 20%. Damn. Right. So it's states are different state to state and how they do it, but lots of small districts. Charters tend to be small, privates tend to be small.
Right. And does this, I don't know if these numbers also include like First Nations, sovereign, reservation type schools and stuff as well.
Or the territories, or even Department of Defense schools or Bureau of Ed, Indian Ed schools. Yeah, I'm not sure. Right. Yeah, there's all these niches in the sector for sure.
Yeah. And that's one thing. A lot of the numbers you see are traditionally around public schools, the traditional public schools. And so it's hard to get that true number when you start lumping in everything else.
Right. That makes sense. It's definitely complicated. And it does seem like that there's a missing opportunity from corporate people. And I'm not just using Microsoft or Google or whatever, but there's a lot of organizations out there that probably should be partnering with y'all to make sure that, this is being done in a safe way. But
it's the sectors. It's difficult sometimes for companies to wrap their heads around the sector. The sales cycle can be really long. The margins are absolutely not the same as in other sectors. There's a challenge also of how to count sort of users or seats in a selling to a school, because students and teachers are fundamentally treated differently in school systems, right? And if you're selling, there's some solutions where only the teachers will use, but they'll try to sell it counting the students also as users, and the prices just don't work out well. I mean, the good news is for those companies that really understand the market and are willing to customize their tools to the market. I think the education sector can be very loyal to the people that work with them and for them well. But I think there's a lot of people who just get frustrated because they just see it's easier to sell into other markets. They'll get quicker sales, higher margins for less work. And the education market is highly decentralized, right? I mean, you really, by and large, you don't go to a state and the state buys for everybody. That's what everybody's dream is. That's not how it works. You can't go to the U.S. Department of Education and sell something and then every school district will use it. Does not work that way. In fact, in many areas, if one local school district buys a product, the next door neighbors won't buy it just because, right? I mean, it's highly independent decision-making, idiosyncratic. So, our culture works against being helped sometimes in this way, particularly when like with technology, we can think about interesting ways to scale the solution pretty easily, but it's like the politics and the people that make it challenging.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about how communication, and one of the things that I added here for a question was, what does it look like when you're communicating security events? Log4j came out, SolarWinds was out early last year. A lot of these, maybe not SolarWinds so much, but Log4j, everybody's using Java, because that's what their trash software runs on, for learning management systems. How do you communicate major issues like that, and do these organizations take you seriously? Are some of them treating you like the only lifeline, or is it like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get to it when we can, or we're just everything's burning down around them? What does it look like for something like a Log4j?
So I can talk a little bit about that. So it was pretty clear to us very early on this is going to be a big deal, and so we held we pushed out some alerts to our members, and we're actually very attentive to the signal to noise ratio. So for those who participate in other ISACs, it can feel like a fire hose. Like you're getting emails about alerts all the time. Mm-hmm. And then if you go looking for them, online as well, you're just overwhelmed by how much, the world is burning and falling down. But it becomes so much that people get desensitized. But this is one of the cases where we pushed out an alert proactively to our members. And so we actually probably communicate like just sort of broad alerts to our members less frequently to our members than maybe some other ISACs. We send out digests and things that are K-12 specific to them. And we have, now a couple of times a month, we'll have briefings with them where we'll just walk them through what they need to know. Specifically. But for Log4j, push something out, held a couple of special meetings with our members about it, and the need that we identified, because there was a lot of great work that was being done in the security community to crowdsource information about Log4j vulnerability. CISA leaned in really heavily. And so we were, relying on information from them and making sure our members understood it. But what we did with our members is we actually crowdsourced the Log4j status of a lot of education specific software that's never going to show up in those like broad crowdsourced lists of enterprise software. Right. Because education uses, there's hundreds of small niche mom and pop apps, right? And some of the education companies were really good about it. They put out within a couple of days, we're affected, we're not affected, we've patched, do the patch. The ones that were complicated were we're not running a version of Log4j that was affected. Well, that actually is not a great, that's not as good a news as you think that it is, because that means you're running an older version of Log4j, which has
our Log4j is so old that we didn't have to patch it because the bug wasn't introduced until after the patch that we're running.
Right. So, and then of course it was patch 215, then 216, then 217, 217.1, right? So, we had to keep, sort of staying on top of this with our members around that. But ultimately, our goal was so that every school district that was leaning in on this didn't have to hound all of their vendors, right? If we sort of crowdsource that together, they could rely on our list, which we then vetted ourselves to make sure that it was accurate. So it was a big help for folks. But it's did every school district do everything that they needed to do? Probably not. Did every vendor? Probably not. But we helped a lot of people. Right. And I think with a resource that they wouldn't have been able to do, doing work that they wouldn't have been able to do on their own.
Right. Yeah, there's strength in numbers. So if you could, we have 500 school systems using your software that we know of. You need to fix your stuff because you represent a huge risk by not patching it, and that'll help.
And I should say there's another service that we've provided and we do provide for our members, which is when there is a vendor that maybe has a security has had a security incident or has a vulnerability in their software, and the school has not been able to get the attention of the company to fix it. Right. we have stepped in and been that intermediary for the schools. It provides a couple of benefits. One is because of our connections and where we're sort of reaching out from, we're usually able to get to somebody there. So actually, this one company that I'm thinking of, I actually went through a board member that I connected to through LinkedIn to get to them. Right. I'll spend the time. We'll do the work to get in there. But we've also had instances where school districts have stepped forward to report a vulnerability, and the company turns around and complains to the bosses of the people who brought up the vulnerability. Right, there's a power dynamic that gets all crisscrossed and dynamics get weird. But you know what? Doesn't matter to us. So we can kind of shield districts from some of that, because in reporting the vulnerability, honestly, it doesn't matter how we've learned about it. As long as we can verify that it's a vulnerability, like we want to make sure that they're informed and then they fix it. Right. And, so that's also something that we do on behalf of our members. And we've been responsible for fixing software that's run, in thousands of schools as a result, which is really nice. And, it's some stuff we do behind the scenes, right? So it's not, we're not crowing about it. We're just trying to do the day-to-day work to get stuff done and uplift the cybersecurity of the sector as a whole.
Yeah. Right. And along those same lines with the vendors, I mentioned earlier that a lot of those vendors that are specific to schools aren't in much better shape than schools are themselves. Well, that's another area we've discussed and said, well, look, our essential protections would be perfect for if you are a vendor and you don't know what to do with securing your environment. Hey, take our essential protections and start there. If you're doing that, a school can, when they reach out to you and go, well, what are you doing for security? They can go, oh, well, look, we've at least implemented these, essential protections that K-12-6 recommends. So they've got some baseline. So that's another area of that advocacy piece that we really want to, try to focus on with vendors is getting them up to the same level that they need to be as along with schools.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was looking through some of these protective measures. A lot of them are ironically stuff that corporate environments should also as well,
and that's not. And that's the thing about those. There's nothing new. I mean, when we set out on this, we said, look, we're not going to recreate the wheel. They're nothing new. And if you look on they're all mapped back to CSF and CIS controls. So, but to your point, that's exactly it. These are things that really everybody should be doing, and but they're very basic. Right.
Limiting exposed services, blocking malicious documents, campaign against email scams, filtering out malware, restricting administrative access, no local admin on a box. You shouldn't have local admin on a box. Endpoint protections, protecting user logins, improving password management, online class invasions. That's happened a couple of times actually to my daughter's school, where somebody shared a Zoom password and they shouldn't have, and they got Zoom bombed. So that one's a little rough, but backing up critical systems. I think there's a lot of companies that still don't do that one correctly. So and managing sensitive data. Those are all great, things that you should be looking at. If, there's a link in our show notes. If you are a company and you're wondering about things yourself there, take that for your own company and, do the assessment and, look at some of these controls and see if there's something you're lacking your own self in your own organization. So,
and there's actually a state organization that I was talking to because they deal with K-12. And when I spoke with them and showed these protections to them, that was their exact thing is, well, can we take these and share them with our other state institutions and state, and I said, of course, that's what they're there for. Share them with everybody, because this will help, small businesses are in the same boat. So, yeah.
What's really interesting, I think, too, is the degree to which the insurance companies, the ones that offer cyber liability, are driving change right now in the K-12 sector. Because I think, as everybody knows, they have evaluated cyber risks very poorly. They've been losing money hand over fist. Every sector, but including in K-12. And I think to some degree, schools have been so at least leadership has been pretty laissez-faire, because they're like, if something goes wrong, that's what we have insurance for. And,
Right.
you know, of course, my point is I still wear a seatbelt and drive on the right side of the road, and I have auto insurance and health insurance. And frankly, I'd rather not use it, because then I'm already in a world of hurt. I'm glad I have it. You should probably have insurance yourself, but like, it's not a substitute for protecting yourself. But nonetheless, that's what districts have done. But now, between two things have happened. One is obviously the rates have gone up incredibly, you know, not just 10 or 20%, but we're like 100, 200, 300% if you can get it. And so most schools across the country are on a July 1 fiscal year, most. So they're looking at renewals of their liability policies this spring, like they're just starting right now. And the questionnaires that have come out from insurance companies, it used to be like there was a question or two. Do you do this? Do you do that? And it didn't matter what you answered, you just still get your insurance. Last year, maybe they were getting questionnaires of 3 or 4 pages. And in some cases, they were saying, you know, you really need to put these controls in place. This year, the questionnaires are like double that size, like 6, 10 pages long. And if you don't put in place these controls, they're not even going to write you a policy. Like maybe in last year, maybe they would say they write you the policy, but they double the rate. They're not even going to write the policy. And frankly, the things that the insurance companies are asking are hugely overlapping with our essential protections list. So we've even been in some conversations with some school insurance pools and their insurance companies. Like, maybe you should like just accept our self-assessment and our essential protections. Because, you know, we're not making this stuff up. This is based on, I mean, it's you know, ties back to NIST and CIS. It's based on the data that we've been collecting about actual cybersecurity incidents affected by schools. It's totally responsive to alerts that the FBI and CISA have put out that are school specific, like not just general ones, but like school specific. Like they're CISA or no, I'm sorry, maybe it was FBI put out an alert about Zoom bombing. Right? How to defend against it, right? Right. So there is some of that guidance that's available. And so we've taken all that in mind as we built these sets of controls. So, you know, there's not really an accepted standard for schools right now, but it does feel like we're coalescing towards one. And I think it's going to look a lot like what we put together. And frankly, if it is what we put together, fabulous. If it's 80% of what we put together and some other stuff, I mean, cool. Like there's no standard right now. Right. And that's just not acceptable. And I think as a parent, as a taxpayer, if I was an employee of a school system, I mean, I'd be pretty nervous. I mean, I think, you know, folks said their parents and their kids are in schools. I mean, how much confidence do you have in the care those schools are handling, not just the personal data, but, you know, one of the attacks that has really taken off against school districts really starting in 2019 has been ransomware. Right. And so we've seen major school districts having to shut down for days or weeks, some of their systems, losing data, right? Because they can't deliver education, like they can't route the buses, they can't answer the phones, they can't get to the curriculum. Right. There was a school district down in Texas where the ransomware actors didn't like how the negotiations were going. So they started to email the parents directly, complaining and said, parents, we just want you to know your school district's IT security is awful. We stole all their stuff. You should tell them to give us a call back and pay the ransom so we don't dump your kids' information on the dark web. I mean,
oh my gosh,
you know, education. So
that's
we've
brilliant.
got some of the best stories. I have to tell you, there's you know, down in Florida, there's a mother and her daughter that are facing criminal charges for using electronic systems to make up votes for who was going to be homecoming queen.
Oh my!
The story in Missouri about the governor and the reporter, where the reporter, you know, did view source and said, you know, you have a problem, and the governor says you're hacking. That was a State Department of Education website. right? I mean, so that was that was teacher data, right? So people don't see that as well. So, I mean, plus kids hacking. I mean, there's always good material here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I going back to the insurance stuff, a lot of people, when they first get it, they think, oh, well, we'll pay $30,000. And, if our complete, service gets completely owned, we're just out $20,000. The insurance will pay for it. But yeah, like you said, they're starting to do due diligence type measures. If you're not, if you keep trying to, poke that hornet's nest with a stick and you get hit, you poked the hornet's nest, you didn't do what was necessary to secure your own system. So we're not going to pay that. So you're transferring the risk to something that isn't necessarily 100% transferred.
Well, and the problem with a lot of the insurance too, that especially schools look at, is they have a rider on their policy. It's not a true cyber policy. And that's the other thing, is in a lot of those policies, it may not even pay. It might pay they might say, hey, we'll pay the ransom, but guess what? Who's going to pay to have all your systems restored, to have an IR and forensics company come in and do all that work? Is it going to pay for that? So there's a lot of issues that go into the cyber insurance side of things that they don't even, I think about, because, hey, when you have a rider, it's just, okay, well, yeah, we're going to match a little bit on what you've already got. So it's another issue that just, I don't think is thought about the right way.
Well, and to say nothing of the longer tail remediation and like rebuilding of systems, right? Because there's a couple of major school districts that got hit in Maryland and New York. And for medium-term recovery, I mean, they're asking for anywhere between both of those districts, $8 and $10 million in new budget for technology to get their systems up to snuff so they can protect them in the future, right? Yeah. So that's not even the immediate response, which might have been $1 million or $2 million, right? And I don't know if they paid or not, right, or what was involved in that. But I mean, there's IT management in general, I think is challenged in K-12 because I think it's not as proactive and not as systematic. It is something that is, it's understaffed, it's underappreciated, it's higher turnover. It is definitely a challenging arena. And I think a lot of people are in it because they're in it for the kids, right? Because they know what difference they're making and how much they can help and how much they're relied on. But we also do see people burned out from it, and it's understandable why that happens.
Yeah. So I think Ms. Berlin, Mr. Betcher, I have one more question, but do either of you have any other things you'd like to bring up or mention?
Let me see. Do any vendors give things for free to school districts? I'm sure there could be a tax break or something like that, but I can see maybe a vulnerability management company saying, here, you can use our product because, well, you won't have support because that'll cost us a lot, but go ahead and use our product. We'll get our name out there. I remember that we could use Oracle. We could download the database and use it all we wanted. There was just a limit. And so that would get students involved in that particular, it was marketing, right?
Yeah. Nobody should use Oracle.
Even if it's free.
No. They will never be a sponsor of the BreakSec podcast for this reason. So, now I apologize if they are a K6 sponsor, but
they are not right now. So.
Not yet.
Okay.
Right. but so this is the thing with K-12 that where that so Microsoft and Google have done some of that, not on the security side, but in general, when they said with students, hey, you can use Word and our Office suite, Google suite, because then kids get exposed to it. Like you said, then when they go to college, guess what they want to use when they go to the corporate world? Exactly. So that's a great, and we've talked about that, and that's been kind of, I have this long-term pipe dream of what I'd love to see, K-12 6 turn into with stuff like that. But the problem is, as you mentioned, the support. it's like open source with schools. There's a lot of great tools out there, but they don't have the resources to implement it, management, update it, all that kind of stuff. So that's where that kind of falls. I mean, for larger organizations, that might be a good solution. But it's just one of those that I think the problem with schools is they would probably jump on some of that stuff. And this happens with products they buy. They'll jump on and be like, oh, this is great. They'll pay all this money. They'll get it implemented. And guess what? They don't have anybody to manage it, to run it, to do anything with it. So it sits there. And then they just spend all this time to do it. So that's the only thing that would be. I would love to see some companies step forward, like I mentioned earlier, and say, hey, look, we've got a product and we'd love for schools to be able to use it and train kids on it so that when they get out of the real world, they've got experience and they can step right into certain roles. And that would be awesome. Like I said, that is actually part of my big pipe dream, spiel of K-12-6, but it's just, there's a long way to go before I think we can get to that.
Right. Okay. All right. I think we're over time here a little bit, but that's fine. So people listening to the podcast, hey, I'd love to help. Are there any opportunities for people like myself or others to come and help out with some of this, maybe to, I don't know, speak or, come in and, assist, organizations. I have a company, I'm a consultancy of 50 people, and I want to come and help out because one, I like making money, and there's $1 billion industry here that sounds like it's untapped for business. I mean, what's the ways to, how would I engage with your organization if that's something I wanted to do?
Well, I'll give one and then I'll let Doug jump in. So one of the things that we just recently started, because we had people asking just those questions, is an ambassador program where we are going to say, hey, if you want to be a part of this, they sign an agreement and then they can go out and on our behalf, go to schools and speak about cybersecurity, about security awareness. They can go to, conferences and set up a table if they want to let people know about K-12-6, go speak at events. And so that's a perfect way that people could get involved if they say, hey, look, I know K-12-6 needs help, but my company doesn't necessarily want to do anything, but I would like to be involved. That's one way they can get involved.
Okay. And then otherwise, I mean, for, companies looking for some sort of a bigger engagement, probably reaching out to us at info@k12six.org. And then we just kind of would, field those as we go. Certainly we've got our regular sponsorship program that looks like sponsorship of lots of, trade associations and things like that. But, we're very open to ideas. If people have, if their heart is in the right place, if they see a need, if we see a win-win in that situation to people who really get the market and have a solution that will work. And I want to say, I mean, Eric and I are pretty brutal about that assessment because Eric's laughing here. He's more brutal about it than I am. But, it doesn't help anybody to push a solution on schools that's not going to be successful in that environment. And we do understand what's required to do that. And that's where it's a little bit frustrating, I think, because there are a lot of great tools out there and solutions, but schools just need more support by and large to using them, or they're really just not in a place where they can use them. It's going to need to be some intermediary working on their behalf, whether that's an MSP or somebody else. We'll see.
Right. And there's a lot of good tools out there, but there's a lot more snake oil, or people that, are pushing an agenda that won't help them because I'll just drop you a tool. And like you said, nobody's there to manage it. So, they've spent $100,000 on a tool that doesn't do them any good. And, they would have gotten more out of it if it had been another way.
Or it's fine for what it protects against, but they oversell, like the variety of threats that schools are facing, I think is something that they're still having to grok, right? Which is they have, it's not just, hacker sitting in, North Korea or Iran or Russia or whatever with the hoodie on, targeting schools. But it's all the mass stuff, mass phishing and scanning stuff. It's a lot of insider stuff, right?
It's the ones sitting in their own chairs.
Yeah. I mean, it's employees who make mistakes. It's kids who are bored. It is their vendors and suppliers, right, who are also not paying attention to this stuff, right? So and occasionally you've got hacktivists who out there who get that schools have a platform, right? And so they're worth, those public facing assets, social media accounts and websites are worth something to them, right? So it's really the range of threats. So even if their controls are really good for one sort of threat, there's so much that schools are facing that they need to really have a broad program in place to think about how they're going to mitigate those risks.
Yeah. And that's what I always keep people coming back to the basics, which is, our essential protections. Do the basics first. Yeah. If you're not doing those, no product is going to make, high dollar product, this or that. Just do the basics. Right.
That's great. That's great to hear. So yeah, if you're looking for volunteer opportunities, feel free to, there's opportunities to raise awareness without, selling a blinky box. So that's good to know. So I think we're good. Is there any last thoughts, Doug, Eric, and then we'll wrap the show up.
I mean, thank you for giving us a chance to talk about this situation through the school's lens. Sure. I think, a lot of people don't think, they think of schools with, little kids, and maybe they're not chalkboards now, they're whiteboards or Zoom classrooms or what have you. But I don't think that people really have understood how much schools now rely on technology, just like, enterprise organizations of all types. Right. But, everything is run by technology in schools now. Right. All the employee systems, all the classroom systems, bell systems, physical security,
rat traps,
HVAC.
Sorry, what? Rat traps?
I'm dead serious.
Door locks. Everything is IP based, right? And computer based. And as a result, they've exposed themselves to this risk that they didn't understand and realize they were taking on. And right. It's definitely a wicked problem, like Eric suggested. It's one where we're dealing with awareness, but it's we could throw all the money in the world at it, but if we're not thinking about it in a smart way, it's not going to solve the problem, right? It's about people, right. It's about policy, it's about raising their maturity and thinking about things. This is not it's not a sprint. It's not just a checklist. Even if you go through our checklist, you do all those things, like the bonus is that we're going to give you then like a full NIST assessment or something, right? Right. You do these 12 things,
then here's
you got them nailed. Well, great. We got a list of 100 coming your way.
In a lot of ways, you can think of it. It's like school itself. You're never finished. You're always learning something new, and it's the same. You do this, but hey, guess what? Now you got to go on to this. So
right. Awesome.
But we got to get preschool and play school right first.
That's right. That's right. So Doug, Eric, thank you for coming on. If people wanted to reach out to you and ask more questions, maybe there's some educators listening on the podcast this week. They managed to find us somehow. How would they get a hold of your organization? Hey, and see what they can do to partake of K6 or K12-6.
Yeah, well, I'd say probably the easiest way to get us is if you go to k126.org, k12six.org. There's a contact page there, and that'll get to us. That's probably the most straightforward way to find us. But we're also up on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter as well. But just going straight to our website is the easiest thing, I think, for folks to do, and it will definitely get to us.
Okay. Sounds great. Okay. Excellent. All right. So Ms. Berlin, you've got kids, budding hackers of their own. Did you make the printer off limits before from now on, no more printers? No more.
I don't know. Do the Marines have printers now? Like,
he's in the Marines now. Okay, that's good. All right. So he's got a legitimate job now. That's excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
No. Yeah. That's why he sent. That's why I sent him.
Okay.
No printing. He
awesome.
He actually had to pay. They did all of the math to figure out how much it cost to print. It was something like 400, 500 copies or something, right? No. Across all of the schools. It was like $20.
Well,
so worth
paper
it.
And ink.
So worth it.
That's good.
He would definitely do it again.
I'll tell you though, I mentioned my whole pipe dream. The part of that is to take kids like that and use them to protect their own schools, to give them the guidance they need, because they're already out there messing around. So why not? Let's take them and go, hey, you know what? Let me teach you the right way to do things.
Exactly.
And a little bit of morals and things like that, and protect your own environment. So, it's good that those kids are out there. We just need to guide them.
Yeah.
Or we could just send them to the Marines.
Well, that's another way. Yeah. Hey, but I'll tell you what, if there's all the services now have very good cyber programs. So that is a good option.
And when schools get into trouble, they do send in the National Guard.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
There you go.
For cyber, yeah.
His punishment at home was just learning about Wireshark and packets. So
very nice. So, Ms. Berlin, how would people find you to talk about everything you're doing with health, mental health issues and tabletop exercises and stuff? How would they find you?
Easiest is at Infosister, INFOSYSTIR. And I'll be at, I don't know, I'm going to next besides Baltimore, besides Huntsville. RSA.
Okay. All right.
Other 5 other ones that I can't remember.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Also InfoSec Roleplay and Hackers Health are the mental health items. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Mr. Betcher, tell us how we can get a hold of you and LogMD.
Yeah, on the website log-md.com or on Twitter at BetcherPwned.
Okay. Yep. And LogMD is an incident response and forensic tool to help with logging. So if you're a Windows machine needing logging to get better logging, that will help configure your system. So there you go. You can find the podcast BreakSec on Twitter at BreakSec, BRAKESEC. I'm on Twitter at Brian Break, BRYANBRAKE. We're part of a larger umbrella organization called the InfoSec Education Foundation. We tried to put it in the name, so it's kind of self-explanatory, but we're available for discussions on partnerships and educational opportunities. We're working with Black Girls Hack and other cyber organizations to create educational opportunities where we can. So you can follow us infosec_edu_edufo. That's our other Twitter handle. So we also have a meetup. It's a virtual meetup. I do it out of my office here in Seattle, but CSEC East is the name of it. If you want to keep track of meetings that are coming up, we're the first Wednesday of every month, and we usually have a nice virtual event where we sit around and talk about security. This month we'll probably talk about how macros were disabled in Windows, and Office files and what that really means for organizations. I think it's probably a big game changer there. So come and join us. Just follow CSEC East and check that out. So thank you to all of our Patreon members for their support. The tip jar that we have helps out with domain hosting, Zoom, paying for Zoom, and Libsyn every month for distribution of the podcast, and just time and effort in building our community, which to segue into it, we have a Slack. We have about 2,300 members. very active. We have a code of conduct, and we're a moderated community where you can come in, and we have a threat intel channel. So if you are in education and you want to catch up on, some of the stuff that's going on in there, Riot and Page and Sec and some of our other moderators put in things that we find online that's happening to them in real time, bad URLs that are doing crypto mining or what have you. I tend to put some stuff in there on Twitter from Twitter feeds that I follow quite a bit. So come and join us. Send us a DM to @breaksec or email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Tell your friends, leave a 5-star review on a podcast platform, with good thoughts and, hey, Brian, puts out a weekly show, it's not bad. I listen to it, that'd be great. Gives us more exposure. So, thank you to all who have done that for us. We appreciate it. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves. Leave the printers alone, and take care of yourselves, because as we're fond to say here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.